Welcome to Christopher de Vinck's book launch with Silver Bow Publishing. My name is Megan Hakkinen. I am a two-time world champion ultra cyclist, the author of two adventure cycling memoirs, and the Writing Circles coordinator for the Federation of BC Writers, a provincial nonprofit writing organization. We'll start our event with a territorial acknowledgement, followed by some housekeeping notes. Then I'll introduce Christopher, who will read a few excerpts. We'll have time for questions at the end. Silver Bow Publishing operates on the unceded and ancestral territories of many Indigenous peoples and cultures. As champions of language, we cherish the oral and written traditions of the Indigenous people of this land. We commit to uplift the voices and stories of equity deserving people and communities wherever we work. I reside in Kelowna, BC, on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Okanagan Syilx people. This launch is being recorded and will be available shortly after the event. We've enabled closed captioning for those who use the service. If the text isn't appearing for you yet, click on Show Captions. And please check that you're muted so that we can all enjoy Christopher's words without interruption. I'll start by sharing a bit about Silver Bow Publishing. Silver Bow is an independent creative book publisher committed to publishing great literature in all genres. Candace James, Poet Laureate Emerita for the City of New Westminster, as well as acclaimed visual artist, musician, singer, songwriter, reviewer, and presenter, is at the helm of Silver Bow as general manager. Silver Bow Publishing is located in Greater Vancouver, BC, and typically publishes 20 to 30 books a year of both emerging and established writers. Silver Bow books are available in print and ebook and distributed by Ingram Spark through their iPage catalog to retail bookstores and libraries worldwide. If you would like to purchase a print version of Poems in Celebration of the Muse, please contact your local bookstore and ask them to order a copy of the book from the Ingram Spark iPage catalog. I'll put a couple of links in the chat about Silver Bow and how to find them online. And I guess that's it for my warm-up stuff. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our feature author today, Christopher de Vinck, and we're here to celebrate poems in celebration of the Muse. So Christopher is a husband, father, and grandfather. He earned his doctoral degree from Columbia University and devoted 40 years to his career in public education. Poems in Celebration of the Muse is his 18th book. His previous books have been published by HarperCollins, Doubleday, Macmillan, Hodder, Crossroads, Paulist, Loyola, and Upper Room. Over 200 of Christopher's op-ed essays have been published in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, USA Today, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the NJ Record, the Dallas Morning News, the National Catholic Reporter, Reader's Digest, and Good Housekeeping. He is a contributing columnist for the Dallas Morning News. Poems in Celebration of the Muse is his debut poetry book. So welcome, Christopher. We're really excited to have you here today to, share a bit from this book. It's exciting to have someone who's published so widely already and is still doing a debut book in a different genre. So that's very cool. I guess I was wondering, to get us started, if you could just tell us a bit about what inspired you to write this collection.
Well, thanks for the introduction too, Megan, for sure. And listening to all the books and all the things I've done, it's so odd in a way, because I feel kind of, I'm just writing and just doing. And I wrote this book. Actually, it's just been a compilation of all my poetry. I've been writing poetry for 30 years. And this particular book, I look back to what themes are standing out in the books and the poems that I've done. And I write a lot about women, a lot about the point of view of a woman. So I thought it'd be nice to, especially in this day and age where, the feminist movement is so strong and so fine. And yet there's also a backlash. And I just wanted to write a book really in celebration of women, not in a sexy way, not in an ugly way, but in a real way of women of strength, and that's really the impetus in these poems.
That's really, really interesting to hear. And as as a someone who, you know, goes out and does these challenging bike adventures, and it's trying to situate myself in the world as a woman. I am really looking forward to hearing your reading. So I'll let you take it away from there, and then we can come back for some more questions once you wrap up. Just let me know when you get
Okay,
to the
that'd be
end.
great. And to do these poems and to read these poems, I've always believed that when you read poetry, you should see the text in front of you. So I'm going to flip back here, and just to be able to have the poems in front of people as they read along. And I don't want to talk too much about each poem, but a little slight introduction for each one to get a sense of excitement for what's about to be read. And this first poem, it's the second or third poem in the book. And it's a nice, really nice introduction. Rumi, he writes here, a woman is the light of God. And I think, Megan, think about your career as a strong woman on the bicycle tour with the power and the strength of what you do. It's actually ironically wonderful that you're hosting this, because it really is about the power of women and the beauty of women. And here is a small poem in praise of women. And there's a last line I want you to pay attention to. It says, there is a secret softness. There's a secret softness among all women. So here's the poem, and it's an introduction to the book in many ways. I write in praise of women. I know of no other dream, not flowers, not moonlight, not any other scene that pleases me more than beauty unclothed, women exposed to the painter's brush, to woman's blush, when beauty knows there is no other push towards her lips for a kiss, and a passion never lost. A woman is not gold dust coating our bodies. She's the gloss on our skin at birth. We are born of woman twice, once at birth and once at the festival of our first love-making. I could write about owls, celebrate wheat and water. I could write novels about war and the texture of silk from Persia. I could write about the sea in autumn, but I have been fixed to praise women, weigh their breasts in my hands, measure the curves of their bodies with the calipers of my fingers. I touch women as I touch fresh grapes dangling from the vines of their bodies, succulent, exploding their juices into my mouth. There is a secret softness shared among all women. There's a secret softness shared among all women. This next poem is called Bookmark. And when you think about people that we love, they're everywhere. So when you think about women that we love, they're everywhere. And this book of poems, Megan, this book of poems is really a collection of love poems. They're all love poems about women in general, specific women. They're all love poems. So here's a poem about women being everywhere, certainly inside one of my books, Bookmark. And it's addressing to a woman. I want to let you know that the bookmark you made with a red ribbon and button sewn to a filigree cloth still keeps me in place where left off the night before in my book of poetry. It is easier to turn each page knowing that I have a tool to keep me in my spot here in this room where I still lose myself in thought of you singing at the country church. But then I complete my work for the night. I'm so sorry, this computer just, I'm sorry. It is easier to turn each page knowing that I have a tool to keep me in my spot here in this room where I still lose myself in thought of you singing at the country church. But then I complete my work for the night, lay the thin red bookmark between the two halves of my book, and close the cover slowly, knowing where to begin the next time I come to find you in my reading. To find you in my reading. And this next poem, Ruda has been a very powerful influence in my poetry. He writes very beautiful, sensual poems about women. And I only discovered him not too long ago because I never wanted to read poems in translation. And I really kicked myself because the translation of his work is beautiful. And he says here, I love you as certain hidden things are loved. I love you as certain things. And poetry exists because we seek a way of expressing our love. So here's an inside of a poem. I've searched for ways to say that I love you without being overt, Poetry is not overt. Poetry is a glimpse of a woman stepping into the bath. Poetry is a single breath. Poetry is the skin of a bear that once protected the bear from winter. Perhaps I can speak of love without poetry. Use a candle, describe the flame and the melting wax. Could could arouse the moon at night and ask for ways to illuminate your breasts and face in the darkness. There are owls and wolves in the forest. They are not myths. We do not need evidence that they exist. Love is on my lips. I taste your lips with the honey of my desire. I love you as I love the owls and wolves, the honey and wax, the skin of the bear. You are poetry. You are poetry. Here's a very small dialogue between lovers on a beach at dusk. The sun is setting, the lovers are on the beach, and F. Scott Fitzgerald says they skip briskly into an intimacy from which they never recovered. A dialogue. Are you with me? Yes, the moon is silver. Did you bring a blanket? Well, the wild grass and Van Gogh. Well, where do we sit? At the edge of my lap. Will you speak? If language is a sigh, when will we begin? When the owl begins to sing, but there are no owls. My arms are made of feathers. Do we touch each other first? With our eyes. Not with our hands? With our eyes first. But I'm anxious. The night unrolls her stockings. Are you shy? I dress in silk and silver buttons. Well, what do we do? The night is in our mouths, but there is still an evening light. The sea sky is pouring red to black. Can I take off my clothes? My body is never hidden. I'd like to recite a poem. We have no more need for words. And here again, the lovers at the beach, and this is lovers at a lake. Simply the lovers at a lake. And I want you to think about the heron. The heron in the Japanese world is a beautiful metaphor for things that rise, beauty rising. If you see the Japanese woodcuts, you see all of the herons rising over the reeds and rising into the sunset. It's a beautiful image. And Kenneth Rex Roth, who also has a great influence on my writing, solitude closes down around us. So here's the end of the day, solitude closing around these lovers at the lake. The lake, and this is again speaking to the girl, the lake was yours before it was the heron's. A silent moment of your hands in the water. You convinced me to unbutton our clothes, the sound of your dress dropping to the edge. We were our own Adam and Eve among the hidden sand and trees. We laughed at the thought of the serpent exposing himself, offering his bulbous fruit. The sunlight underlined our body on the towel, like an illuminated manuscript on the table. The air did not sing. There were no campers nearby. We could hear the whisper of our breathing. We were our own private audience. Your performance in stillness was a fresco on my skin. We shared secret things between us, the temperature of water, the yellow and green color of the lily beds. The heron extended her wings and stole our privacy as we slowly dressed. The sky turned from gold to ordinary blue, and the lake disappeared into the crowded past as we two stepped out of Eden, knowing the solitude would not last. And here's another poem that speaks very well to the whole book in celebration of the Muse. And Agnes Nin, of course, so very famous French poet and novelist. And she wrote, I take on the colors of the flowers, the bloom, the delicacy, it becomes me. And I want you to listen to the last line. The last line of this poem says, I am the blossom. You know that wonderful famous song, I Am Woman. Well, here's a poem about a confident woman who speaks, and her last lines, I am the blossom. I am the beauty. It's a lovely, lovely poem in celebration of a confident woman. And here she is speaking. I absorb the flowers in my skin. I'm made for the aroma. I bathe in rainwater. I become malleable in your hands. I dream in the language of flowers. I speak with tongues and petals. I'm absorbed into the soil. Water enters my stem. You can pick me for your vase. Preserve me between the pages of a book. I fit inside you. I sleep inside you. I am the woman in the garden. not eve, not mist or dew on your brow. I am the blossom. I am the, pick me for my beauty, my strength. I am the blossom. And here's a lover, a woman speaks to her lover. And it's a no. And this poem speaks about know a woman before you touch her. Know her name, know her family, know her mother and father. I got to know my wife so beautifully well. We spoke about kids and grandkids, and we were engaged in I think 4 months, married. Know the woman before you touch her. And Sylvia Plath writes, let me live, love, and say it well in good sentences. And here's the woman speaking to her lover. You said you would trace me with your hands. You wanted to feel the lines of my body, as if you were reading a poem, seeking the metaphors of my breasts, the similes of my nipples, the rhythm between my thighs. I felt your hands touching my waist. Did you feel the curve of the moon? Why did you hesitate when you felt the structure of my spine? Did you like the surface of my arms? Do you anticipate the texture of my lips? Did you enjoy how my dark hair curled between my legs and slipped between your fingertips? Now that you have touched all parts of me, can you close your eyes and draw who I truly am in the air and know that I'm more than texture and shapes? You know, women are so burdened with their breasts and their bodies, and men look at them and they don't even see who they are. Know who I am. I am more than texture and shapes. The confident woman speaks. This little poem, just 3 more. This one's a woman is a bear and a fish. And again, Pablo Neruda says, as you come out of the sea, naked, and return to the world full of salt and sun. So here's a woman speaking about her dual myth of her a bear and her a fish. Nude, I am a sea bear, part mammal, part fish, eager to share my fur and honey with your lips. Caress my scales and tail. Do not be repulsed. A woman is not one myth, not one constellation in the sky. I am both bear and fish. I'm a creature with desires for both berries and seagrass. I'm elusive, spawning inside the water, eager to be alone among the earth and coral. If you want to join me, shed your man eel. Take your poisonous snake and cut off its head. Take what is left of you and crawl inside my body of fur and moist skin. Nude, I am a bear and a sea creature. When you touch my body with your tongue and lips, you will taste my honey and salt. You know, men have these bodies, they have these physical organs, they press them inside a woman, this poisonous snake almost for so many women. But if you want to find the bear and the fish of who I am, touch me with your tongue and lips, you'll taste my salt and my salt, my honey and salt. And this last second to the last poem, no, this is the last poem. This is the last poem. The Cautious Woman. It's a nice way to end a small reading of poetry, and it's a nice way to, again, to give a hint of what this book in celebration of the Muse is all about. Women need to be bold. They need to be themselves. They need to have confidence. They need to be honest with themselves and with others. But they also need to be cautious. And here's a woman who says, do not touch me unless you can prove to me you touched the wet insides of a cave and felt the cold thrill against your fingertips. Do not touch me unless you know the weight of bread in your hands. Do you know the silk of China spring against your cheeks? Do you remember the first time you touched the ocean foam? I am as strong as stone, but I'm not made of stone. I'm fragile, eager for the tenderness of your hands, but you need to show me that you have experience with petals and beads, the points of stars, the round surface of the moon. I need to read the crease in your palm to know that I am your fortune. And every woman is a fortune to the man who loves her. Every man is a fortune to the woman who loves her. I need to read the crease in your palm to know that I'm your fortune. And poetry is a fortune. Poetry is a portal into finding out what is really true inside a human being, inside a person. One of the most dangerous things you can ask a lover is, what books are you reading? What poets are you reading? What art do you love? Because speaking about those things reveals who you are. And in celebration of the muse, in celebration of women, in celebration of the fortune of what love is. And this is a book of love poems. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you, Christopher. If you want
That
to
okay?
turn your camera around so we
Oh
can see
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
again,
I can do this. I can do this.
you can do it.
Oh, it worked.
So,
There. Hope that was okay.
beautiful. Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing just a few of the poems in this new collection. I can really feel the passion and excitement in your voice as you read and you explore the muse and women from kind of different angles and perspectives. I especially love these lines from inside a poem, I think. Poetry is a glimpse of a woman stepping into the bath. Poetry is a single breath. Poetry is the skin of a bear that once protected the bear from winter. I I just love that. And there's so many wonderful lines and sounds and movements, and you really brought it to life. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. This has been a wonderful. This is just a wonderful opportunity to who knows where poetry goes, who knows where words go, but to be able to do this, it's a real privilege for me to do this.
Near the end of the of your reading, you mentioned, asking about someone's favorite music or favorite writers or favorite books was kind of, a bit of a glimpse inside of them. And I was wondering if you could tell us what poets have influenced you the most. You include a lot of little kind of, what's the word? Not excerpts. There's a special word for it, but little bits.
Yeah, yeah, little introduction. And it's very, on the one hand, it's a very typical question, but it's such an important question. I started reading for the first time William Carlos Williams when I was at Columbia, and it just knocked me. I just loved the imagery. I loved the compassion that he felt as a physician. He was so kind and gentle to his patients, but his poetry was small little clips, and I wrote for 5, 6, 7 years poetry in the vein of William Carlos Williams. It was a big influence on my life. Then I read Archibald MacLeish. He wrote a poem about a boy going into a shed, a tool shed, and the boy needed some comfort. And Dylan Thomas, in my high school English class, the first time the poem made a difference, we read Fern Hill by Dylan Thomas. And in the poem, they talk about the cock was on the shoulder of the farm. The cock was on the shoulder of the farm. It's a rooster sitting on a fence. And the metaphor just threw me. So Dylan Thomas was a very big part of my life. And as I grew older, I was greatly influenced by Charles Baudelaire, because Baudelaire wrote, long before Whitman did, he wrote free verse. So lots of Baudelaire. And recently, for 5 years, on my table, Wallace Stevens has been open. And I've read Wallace Stevens for 5 years and use his concept of philosophy, mixing philosophy with imagery. So he was a big influence. So it's really broadly William Carlos Williams, Archibald MacLeish, Dylan Thomas, and then it was Wallace Stevens. And now the last few years, it has been Baudelaire, not too recently, but it's been Pablo Neruda, of course, had the greatest influence on my most recent last 3, 4 years. And I do think that's what Candace at Silver Bow was responding to also, because I've grown so much in the writing, I can compare the work. So Pablo Neruda right now has been my greatest influence.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear a bit about where you draw your, creative inspiration from. I was wondering also, when did you first start writing poetry seriously?
I started writing poetry in 1975. I was in love with a girl, and I asked her to marry me. And I've learned you don't ask a girl to marry you unless you know she's going to say yes. And I was so heartbroken. I was in my dorm at Columbia, and there was a Saturday afternoon festival in the street with the steel drums and the music and the dancing. And I was in my room, absolutely heartbroken, just heartbroken. And the dorm, people were drinking and the sex and the drugs and Columbia and all this. I didn't want to do drugs and sex and Columbia. I sat at my desk. And how do you fill a broken heart? With drugs and sex and music. I filled it with poetry. I started writing my first poem, and I've never stopped writing. and that was the really beginning of my writing of the poetry from the loss of this girl. 2 years later, I meet my wife. Life changes, world changes. But the writing of poetry was seriously begun at the dorm in 1970, 75. And I, like I said, I write every day. Now that I'm retired after 6 years, I was 40 years as an educator. But now I'm retired. Every morning I get up at 5, 6 o'clock. I write for 3, 4 hours in the morning, mostly poems, and essays I write again for the newspaper, for the Dallas paper. But my brother says, Chris, writing is an obsession, and I become obsessed with it. So that's how I started writing poetry, and I haven't stopped in 40, 50 years.
Wonderful. If we have any questions from the audience, you can either put them in the chat or you can, unmute yourself and ask. And while we're thinking about that, I guess I'll ask you one more question, and that was, how did your upbringing influence your poetry? I think you touched on it a little bit, and
Yeah,
that's being in
I
love
would,
with the girl.
yeah, Megan, you're asking such good questions. And I came from a house of writers. My father was a writer. My mother was a writer. My father wrote a number of books of philosophy, and my father translated the Byzantine daily worship in the Byzantine church. When the Vatican came and said the text needs to be in English, my dad translated the text in the Byzantine rite to English. My mother is a poet. Her last book of poetry was published posthumously by Paraclete Press in Massachusetts. She's had 10, 15 books published. She introduced me to William Carlos Williams. She encouraged my writing all my life. To have a poet in my house, I met Denise Levertov because of my mother. I met all these writers. So my mother was a big, big influence on my writing. So growing up in a house, I always tease that my mother and father were two typewriters. My dad up downstairs at his office, my mom upstairs in her bedroom, and you hear their typewriters going back and forth. So I came from a house of writers, and it's been a blessing. I said to my mother once, after 5 years of writing poetry and sharing it with her, when you're a kindergarten kid, you bring your mom a painting, and this is the most beautiful painting, goes on the refrigerator. My mom's been very complimentary of my work. After 5 years, I said to my mom, Mom, you keep saying my work is nice. You keep saying it's fine. But I really, tell me what you really think. And she got angry. And Christopher, I will never, ever lie to you about your writing. If I don't think it's good, I will tell you. If I think you're growing, I will tell you. So for the last 40 years of my life, my mother has been a guide. She's been a critic. We share poets. We share poetry. Mom died 3 years ago. To sit with her, reading my poems to her, sit with her, she reads my poems to me. So it was a very unique circumstance. And I wasn't a writer. I wasn't a reader. That only came into that my third, fourth year in college. So it's been I'll tell you, it sounds kind of odd. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Fred Rogers, was my closest personal friend for 18, 19 years. And he's the only one who ever asked me, so Chris, how does God play a role in your writing? And I was really taken by that because it's a very private question. But I do believe there is that wonderful line from Chariots of Fire. A reporter asked him, why do you run? He said, I run because God made me fast, and I run for his pleasure. I had no desire to be a writer, no sense at all I'd ever be a writer. And I just keep doing it, and it's there. So I write for God's pleasure. I write because it's what I do. So that meant a lot to me. And there's another line too, Megan, I'll end with this. In Don Quixote, at the end of the play, he's dying and he's in Sancho Panza's arms, and Quixote looks up at him and he says, I just wanted to add a measure of grace to the world. And it's been my vocation as a writer to write about beauty, to write about simple things, to write about things that are charming. I refuse to write about what is ugly. Not that I'm naive. I do write about sorrow, but I don't write for the market. I don't write about ugliness. I don't write about murder. I don't write about, you read these poets that you can't read them. You can't understand them. I wanted to write about beauty. I wanted to write about goodness. I wanted about a purity of heart. And that's been my guiding light for my essays, my books, my poetry, my wife, my children, my grandchildren. So it's been a real blessing. So that's.
Well, thank you for being here today to share some of that beauty. If we don't have any questions, I think that wraps up our launch for Poems in Celebration of the Muse by Christopher de Vinck with Silverbow Publishing. Thanks for joining us today, and I hope you purchase this wonderful collection and be sure to join us for our next author launch event.
Thank you, Megan. This was wonderful.